My name is Amasse, and at 34 years old, I never imagined I would hear those words from my own mother. A hush fell over the opulent restaurant as she raised her crystal glass on her 58th birthday, her eyes locking with mine from across the elegantly set table. "The best birthday gift I could possibly give her," she announced to our stunned family and friends, "would be to simply leave her life. Instead of leaving, I made her leave mine." If you're listening to this, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please, leave a comment, and be sure to like and subscribe to follow my journey of reclaiming my life after decades of emotional abuse. Let me tell you a little more about myself and how things reached this breaking point with my mother. I work as a successful freelance graphic designer, creating branding packages for small businesses and startups. I love my work. It grants me creative freedom and the ability to help others realize their dreams. I've always been drawn to art and visual communication, something my mother, Laura, never understood or valued. Laura is 58 and works as a senior bank manager at one of Boston's largest financial institutions. Her world has always been one of meticulous order, exacting standards, and an obsession with outward appearances. Growing up, our house had to be immaculate for any visitor. My clothes had to be perfectly pressed, and I was expected to earn top marks in every subject. Anything less than perfection was unacceptable in her eyes. My father died when I was 12. He was a gentle, kind-hearted man who balanced my mother's rigid personality. An architect by trade, he was the one who always encouraged my artistic talents. When he passed away suddenly from a heart attack, he left us the family home in the Boston suburbs and a considerable sum from his life insurance and savings. It should have provided financial security, but instead, it became another tool of control for my mother. After my father was gone, my mother's grip tightened. It was as if losing him made her cling desperately to everything and everyone left in her life, especially me. I became the sole focus of her perfectionism and her criticism. I can still recall how she micromanaged every aspect of my teenage years. Sleepovers were preceded by exhaustive interrogations. My homework was scrutinized twice, once by me and again by her. My outfits were curated based on what she deemed appropriate, not on what I wanted to wear. Our home sits on a quiet street in Brookline, a suburb just outside of Boston. It's a beautiful, four-bedroom colonial-style house with a spacious kitchen my father renovated himself and a backyard with a maple tree my parents planted when they first moved in. The house is a vessel of so many memories, both beautiful and painful. Every corner holds echoes of my childhood, the sound of my father's laughter, and the constant hum of my mother's criticism. Throughout my life, Laura held up a distorted mirror, constantly comparing me to other children she deemed more successful or accomplished. Her colleague's daughter, who became a surgeon, our neighbor's son, who got into Harvard, the niece who married a wealthy entrepreneur at 25. In comparison, I was never enough. My artistic talents were dismissed as a hobby, not a real career. My sensitivity was labeled a weakness, not emotional intelligence. Her expectations were a constantly moving target. If I earned straight A's, she'd ask why I wasn't in more extracurriculars. If I joined clubs, she'd question why my grades weren't higher. When I was accepted to Boston University on a partial scholarship for graphic design, she complained that I should have applied to more prestigious Ivy League schools. The achievement I was so proud of was completely overshadowed by her dissatisfaction. After college, I made the decision to move back home temporarily to save money while I built my freelance business. What was meant to be a one-year arrangement stretched into nearly 7, as Laura found ways to make me feel both obligated to stay and guilty for wanting to leave. She would talk about how lonely she was, how the house was too big for one person, how she worried about her health. Then, in the same breath, she would criticize my career choice, my appearance, or my lack of a serious relationship. The financial situation between us grew increasingly complicated. The inheritance my father left was placed in a joint account, one that Laura controlled with an iron fist. While I technically had access, any withdrawal I made was met with scrutiny and interrogation. She demanded detailed explanations for how I planned to spend even small amounts of my own inheritance. Meanwhile, she used the funds freely for home renovations, lavish vacations, and designer clothes, all while decrying my business expenses as frivolous. Over the years, Laura violated my trust in countless ways. When I was 16, she read my diary and then punished me for the typical teenage thoughts and feelings I'd expressed in what I believed was a private space. In college, she would call my roommates to check on my whereabouts if I didn't answer her calls quickly enough. Even as an adult living under her roof, she would snoop through my emails, check my browser history on the family computer, and eavesdrop on my phone calls. My relationship suffered under her interference. Any friend she disapproved of was met with a frosty reception when they visited. Any potential romantic partner was cross-examined and found wanting. She would make cutting remarks about their education, career prospects, or family history, often just out of their earshot. Several promising relationships ended because of her behavior, with one boyfriend telling me he just couldn't handle the stress of navigating my relationship with my mother. Despite it all, I kept trying to win her approval, to be good enough in her eyes. I built a successful career despite her predictions of failure. I maintained friendships despite her interference. I carved out a life for myself while living in the shadow of her judgment. But the constant criticism wore me down, year after year, eroding my self-confidence and making me question my own perceptions and decisions. Until that birthday dinner, when everything finally came into sharp focus, I spent weeks orchestrating the perfect celebration for my mother's 58th birthday. I wanted everything to be special, partly because I genuinely hoped to please her, and partly because I still clung to the childish fantasy that if I did everything right, she might finally approve of me. I booked a private dining room at Sorellina, one of Boston's most exclusive Italian restaurants, and her favorite spot for special occasions. I personally selected the menu, ensuring all her favorite dishes were served: prosciutto with figs and aged balsamic, wild mushroom risotto, and ossobuco with saffron risotto. I spent hours on the phone with the pastry chef, designing a custom birthday cake, a delicate hazelnut torte with gold leaf decoration that cost over $200. No detail was overlooked. For her gift, I had saved for months to buy a diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany & Co. It cost nearly $6,000, money I had painstakingly saved for a down payment on my own apartment. But I convinced myself the sacrifice would be worth it, if it could somehow bridge the chasm between us. I had it wrapped in the signature blue box, with a handwritten card expressing how much she meant to me. I invited 15 of her closest friends and family. Her sister Susan flew in from Chicago. Her best friend Diane came, despite recovering from knee surgery. Her colleagues from the bank were there, along with neighbors she'd known for decades. Everyone who mattered to her was in that room, which made what happened next all the more devastating. The evening began beautifully. The restaurant staff was attentive, the food was exquisite, and Laura seemed genuinely happy. She smiled more than I'd seen her in years, laughing at stories her friends shared and graciously accepting compliments. For a few hopeful hours, I let myself believe that this birthday could mark a turning point in our relationship, that the warmth she showed her friends might finally extend to me. When it was time for toasts, each guest stood and shared a memory or a kind word about Laura. Her boss praised her work ethic. Her sister reminisced about childhood adventures. Her friend Diane thanked her for her support through difficult times. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with genuine affection. Then it was Laura's turn to speak. She stood, elegant in the navy blue dress I had helped her pick out, her diamond earrings glittering in the soft light. She thanked everyone for coming, expressing her gratitude for their friendship and support. She spoke of how blessed she felt to have such wonderful people in her life. Then she paused, swirled the wine in her glass, and locked her eyes on mine. "Do you know what the best birthday present would be?" she asked, her voice ringing with crystalline clarity in the suddenly silent room. "If Amasse would finally get out of my life." The silence that followed was absolute. Forks froze midair. Glasses stopped clinking. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on the entire evening. I felt the blood rush to my face as 15 pairs of eyes darted between my mother and me. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Laura continued, seemingly oblivious to the shockwave she had sent through the room. For 34 years, I've watched her make one disappointing choice after another. Her mediocre career as a so-called designer, her inability to find a suitable husband or give me grandchildren, the way she continues to depend on me financially and emotionally instead of standing on her own 2 feet like a real adult. Each word was a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only sit there, pinned by her gaze and her words, as she systematically dismantled my entire existence in front of everyone I knew. One of her friends, Patricia, tried to laugh it off. "Oh, Laura, you don't mean that. You're just joking after a little too much wine." My mother took a deliberate sip from her glass and replied, "I've never been more serious in my life. Sometimes the truth needs to be said. I've carried this burden for long enough." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with either of us. The waiter, who had been approaching with coffee, beat a hasty retreat. The beautiful cake sat untouched on its silver stand. I felt simultaneous waves of humiliation, rage, and a profound, overwhelming sadness. My throat closed up, making it impossible to form a defense or a retort. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of them, refused to give my mother the satisfaction of watching me break. The evening unraveled after that. Guests made flimsy excuses to leave early. The restaurant staff rushed to box up the uneaten cake and retrieve coats. No one knew what to say to me, though a few squeezed my hand or gave me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder on their way out. Within 30 minutes, the private room that had been filled with celebration was nearly empty. The drive home was conducted in complete silence. Laura sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, focusing all my energy on just getting home without falling apart. When we arrived, she went straight to her room without another word, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the remains of her birthday cake and the crushing weight of her public rejection. Sleep was a stranger to me that night. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, my mother's words echoing endlessly in my mind. As painful as her birthday declaration had been, it was merely the crescendo of a lifetime of similar moments, each one a brick in the wall she had built between us. I remembered my college graduation day. I had graduated with honors in graphic design, landing a prestigious internship before many of my peers had even started their job search. As families gathered on the lawn for photos, other parents were hugging their children, expressing pride and excitement for their futures. When I found my mother in the crowd, her first words to me were, "That useless art degree will just have you unemployed and living in my house forever." She didn't even want a picture together. 3 years ago, I landed my biggest client to date, a tech startup that hired me to create their entire brand identity. The project doubled my annual income and was featured in a design magazine. When I showed my mother the article, hoping for a sliver of recognition, she glanced at it and said, "How lucky. They probably couldn't afford a real agency." Then she changed the subject to a friend's daughter who had just made partner at a law firm. And then there was Jason, the architectural engineer I dated for nearly 2 years. He was kind, intelligent, and treated me with a respect and affection I cherished. I thought he might be the one, until the night he came to our house for dinner. Laura spent the entire evening launching a campaign of subtle sabotage, questioning his career prospects and making veiled comments about his modest background. When he stepped away to use the restroom, she leaned in and hissed that I could do better, that he clearly wasn't good enough for her daughter. 2 weeks later, Jason ended things, telling me he couldn't see a future with someone whose family would never accept him. About 2 years before the incident on my birthday, I finally sought professional help. My therapist, Dr. Lawson, helped me recognize the lifelong patterns of emotional abuse and control that had defined my relationship with my mother. He explained concepts like gaslighting, where Laura would deny saying hurtful things I vividly remembered, and emotional blackmail, where she would withdraw affection or threatened to abandon me if I didn't comply with her wishes. The sessions were painful, but illuminating, helping me understand that the problem wasn't my inadequacy, but her toxic behavior. The morning after her birthday, I came downstairs to find Laura having breakfast as if nothing unusual had happened. Dressed for work, she was reading the paper and eating her usual yogurt with granola. I stood in the doorway, waiting for some acknowledgement of the previous night's events, some explanation or apology. "Is there coffee?" she asked, not looking up from her newspaper. "Aren't we going to talk about what you said last night?" I asked, my voice shakier than I intended. She turned a page. "I don't know what you're talking about. If you haven't made coffee, please do. I need to leave for work in 20 minutes. It was such a textbook example of gaslighting that I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I turned and walked out of the house without another word, driving aimlessly until I found myself parked in front of my friend Nicole's building. Nicole and I had been friends since college. She had witnessed Laura's behavior firsthand over the years and had always been a safe harbor when things at home became unbearable. She was also a family law attorney, which would prove invaluable in the weeks to come. Over strong coffee at her kitchen table, I told her the entire story of the birthday dinner. Nicole listened without interruption, her expression growing more and more concerned. "This is more than toxic, Massey," she said when I finished. "This is emotional abuse, plain and simple, and it's time for you to get out." "I know," I admitted. I had known for a long time, but the house your father left to both of you, Nicole reminded me. "The house that, according to the documents you showed me last year, becomes solely yours if either of you decides to leave permanently. Your father made sure you would always have a home, Massey." She was right. My father had been wise enough to include that clause in his will, perhaps sensing that the relationship between my mother and me might deteriorate after he was gone. I had never seriously considered enforcing it, always hoping things would somehow get better on their own. That hope had died at Sorellina the night before. Nicole helped me log into my banking app, where we discovered something alarming. Laura had transferred $15,000 from our joint account to her personal account that morning. It wasn't the first time she had moved money without telling me, but it was the largest amount by far. "She's preparing for something," Nicole said, her voice grim. "This is no coincidence." As we talked more, a plan began to form. Laura had explicitly stated she wanted me out of her life, but legally, financially, and morally, I wasn't the one who should have to leave. The house was half mine by inheritance. My business was established in Boston. My few close friends were here. "You don't have to be the one to go," Nicole said, echoing my own thoughts. "She said she wants you gone." "Fine, but that doesn't mean you have to go anywhere. Maybe it's time she faced the consequences of her own words." With Nicole's help, I began to see that I had options. I didn't have to keep accepting Laura's abuse. I didn't have to keep waiting for an approval that would never come. I could stand up for myself, set boundaries, and reclaim the life and the home that were rightfully mine. When I left Nicole's apartment that afternoon, my decision was made. My mother had asked for a birthday gift, the gift of me leaving her life. Instead, I would give her something else entirely. I would give her exactly what she had given me for 34 years. The experience of having everything she valued controlled by someone else. Over the next 3 days, I gathered every legal document related to our home and my father's estate. The original deed, the updated will, insurance policies, tax records, utility bills. Nicole had advised me to get everything in order before I made a move, and I was determined to be thorough. I hired James Patterson, a private investigator Nicole recommended, to look into our financial situation. I needed to know exactly what assets we held jointly, what belonged solely to me, and what Laura might have hidden over the years. James was discreet, efficient, and uncovered more than I had expected. Within a week, he produced documentation showing that Laura had siphoned over $100,000 from our joint account in the last 3 years. Money that was partly my inheritance from my father, withdrawn without my knowledge or consent. She had used it to invest in stocks, take lavish vacations she claimed were work-related, and renovate parts of the house without consulting me. Armed with this information, I went to our bank and froze the joint account. With Nicole present as my legal counsel, I explained the situation to the bank manager, presenting proof of the unauthorized withdrawals and my partial ownership of the funds. The manager was sympathetic, especially after Nicole pointed out the potential legal ramifications for the bank if they allowed continued unauthorized access to inherited funds. Then I opened a new account solely in my name and redirected the earnings from my freelance business into it. For the first time in my adult life, I had financial resources completely under my own control. The feeling of freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. Laura's reaction was swift and furious. She called my cell phone 17 times in a row when she discovered she couldn't access the joint account. I let the calls go to voicemail, listening later to her increasingly enraged messages. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded in the first one. By the 10th, she was threatening a lawsuit. By the 15th, her voice had taken on a wounded tone, asking how I could do this to my own mother. The manipulation was so transparent now that I could see it for what it was, but it still twisted something in my gut to hear it. I waited until I knew Laura would be at work the next day. Then I called a locksmith and had all the locks on the house changed. The locksmith was initially hesitant when I explained the situation, but the deed with my name on it and the documented history of financial abuse were enough to convince him to proceed. While he worked, I had a security company install cameras around the exterior of the house. If Laura tried to force her way in or damage the property, I wanted it on record. The security technician helped me set up alerts that would send notifications to my phone if anyone approached the house. Nicole came over that evening to help me prepare for the inevitable confrontation. We ran through possible scenarios, practiced what I would say, and reviewed the legal documents one more time. She reminded me that I had every right to protect myself and my property, that Laura's emotional abuse did not entitle her to continue exploiting me financially or to live in a house that was partially mine. "Remember," Nicole said before she left, "you are not doing anything wrong. You are not being cruel. You are setting a healthy boundary with someone who has consistently violated them. This isn't revenge, it's protection." At 6:15 that evening, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the newly installed security camera, I watched Laura approach the front door, grocery bags in hand, clearly oblivious to what awaited her. My heart hammered as she put her key in the lock, then tried it again, frowning when it didn't turn. I took a deep breath and walked to the window. She saw me then, her expression shifting from confusion to rage as understanding dawned. She began pounding on the door, her voice echoing clearly through the wood. "Amasse, open this door right now! What have you done to the locks?" I spoke through the door, keeping my voice as calm and steady as Nicole and I had practiced. "The locks have been changed, Mom. Your key no longer works." "This is my house!" she screamed, her face red. "You can't lock me out of my own home. I'm calling the police." "Legally, this is my house too," I replied, "and I have documentation of financial abuse that gives me the right to protect it. You can call the police if you like. In fact, I already have." It was true. Nicole had suggested I contact the police preemptively, explaining the situation and asking them to make a note in their system that there might be a call from my address. I had spoken with an understanding officer who was familiar with domestic disputes and had assured me they would respond appropriately if called. Laura did call the police, just as I'd expected. When 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later, she launched into a performance of maternal anguish, complete with tears in her eyes and trembling hands. She told them her ungrateful daughter had locked her out of her home, that I was mentally unstable, and that she feared for her safety. I invited the officers inside and calmly presented my documents, the deed proving joint ownership, the bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, the clause in my father's will regarding sole ownership if one party chose to leave. I played them the recording of Laura's birthday speech, where she clearly stated she wanted me out of her life. The officers exchanged a look as they listened. "Ma'am," one of them finally said to Laura, "this appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one. Based on the documentation we've seen, Ms. Spencer has a legal right to be on this property. We cannot force her to let you in." "But my clothes, my personal things," Laura protested. "I'm willing to let you collect essential personal items," I said, with the officers present as witnesses. The look Laura shot me held more hatred than I had ever seen directed at anyone, let alone from a mother to her child. But with the police watching, she had no choice but to agree to my terms. I stood in silence as she packed 2 suitcases with clothes, toiletries, and personal documents from her room. The officers remained present the entire time, ensuring the process remained peaceful despite the palpable tension. When Laura reached for a small jewelry box containing pieces that had belonged to my grandmother, I quietly pointed out that those were family heirlooms that belonged to both of us. After a tense moment, she withdrew her hand. As she prepared to leave, Laura suddenly switched tactics. The rage vanished from her face, replaced by a look of wounded vulnerability I had seen so many times before. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned to me. "How could you do this to me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "After everything I've sacrificed for you? I gave you everything, Massey. Everything." In the past, that performance would have worked. I would have buckled under the weight of the guilt, apologized, and given her whatever she wanted. But now, I remembered her words at the restaurant, spoken clearly and deliberately in front of witnesses. "The best birthday gift would be if I got out of your life," I said softly. "I'm giving you what you asked for. You wanted me out of your life. Instead, I'm removing you from mine. You can contact me through Nicole from now on. She will handle all communication as my attorney." The police escorted Laura to her car. Through the window, I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing down the street. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly alone in my home. The silence felt like both a blessing and a challenge. What would I do with this newfound freedom? Who would I become without the constant weight of her disapproval? I didn't know yet, but I was finally free to find out. Laura checked into the Marriott downtown, a fact I learned from her sister Susan, who called the next day to berate me for throwing my mother out on the street. I listened calmly to Susan's accusations, then explained exactly what had happened at the birthday dinner and in the years leading up to it. Susan's tone softened slightly when I played her the recording of Laura's speech, but family loyalty ran deep. She ended the call by saying she hoped I would come to my senses soon. Within days, I discovered that Laura had launched a systematic campaign to tarnish my reputation and pressure me into backing down. She contacted family members, mutual friends, and even some of my clients with stories about my mental breakdown and how I had cruelly evicted her. According to her narrative, I had become unstable, possibly due to drugs or a personality disorder, and had fabricated accusations against her to steal her house. Several relatives called to express their concern for my mental health. My cousin Thomas, with whom I'd always been close, asked if I needed to talk to a professional. My Uncle Robert suggested I was having an early midlife crisis at 34. Each conversation required patient explanations and, in some cases, sharing evidence of Laura's behavior that I would have preferred to keep private. The situation escalated when Laura began contacting my clients. As a freelancer, my reputation was everything. When she reached out to the marketing director at Horizon Tech, one of my biggest accounts, suggesting my personal problems might affect my reliability, they put our upcoming project on hold, pending the resolution of personal issues. It was a significant financial blow at a time when I was already dealing with legal and emotional stress. 3 other clients distanced themselves after receiving similar calls or emails. One client specifically mentioned not wanting to get involved in family drama. The business I had so carefully built began to fracture under the strain, and with it, my financial stability crumbled. There were moments when the pressure was so intense that I considered giving in, letting Laura back into my home and my life, just to make the nightmare stop. During one particularly low point, I found myself searching online for support groups, anything related to family estrangement and emotional abuse. That's how I found the Healing from Toxic Parents forum, and through it, Olivia. She had gone through a similar ordeal with her own mother 3 years prior and understood exactly what I was enduring. Our first video chat lasted 4 hours. Olivia just listened, validating my experiences and offering practical advice drawn from her own journey. "The smear campaign is a classic," she told me. "My mother did the same thing. She contacted my boss, my friends, even my dentist. It feels like your entire world is collapsing, but I promise you, it gets better. The people who matter will see through it eventually." Olivia recommended Dr. Margaret Vinters, a psychologist specializing in family trauma and emotional abuse. Dr. Vinters offered virtual sessions, which suited my unpredictable schedule and my increasingly tight budget. From our very first meeting, I felt understood in a way I never had before. She helped me recognize the patterns of abuse I had normalized over a lifetime and develop strategies to maintain my boundaries despite the mounting pressure. "What you're experiencing now is an extinction burst," Dr. Vinters explained during one session. "When a person loses control over someone they've manipulated for years, they often escalate their behavior dramatically before giving up. Your mother is throwing everything she has at you because she feels her power over you slipping away." Meanwhile, Laura had hired Frank Wilson, an aggressive family lawyer known for his confrontational approach. Nicole received a lengthy letter detailing Laura's intent to sue me for wrongful eviction, emotional distress, and financial damages. The letter portrayed Laura as a dedicated mother blindsided by her daughter's irrational behavior and demanded her immediate return to the family home. Nicole assured me the claims were legally dubious, but responding would still cost time and money. We filed a detailed response with proof of Laura's financial misappropriation and emotional abuse. The legal back and forth added yet another layer of stress to an already difficult situation. Then, James Patterson, the private investigator, made a significant breakthrough. Laura had a secret bank account containing over $250,000. Based on the transfer dates, it was clear most of it was money she had been gradually siphoning from our joint account for the last decade. It was substantially more than the $100,000 we had initially uncovered, and it was concrete proof of long-term financial fraud. "This changes everything," Nicole said as we reviewed the findings. "This isn't just a few questionable withdrawals. This is the systematic theft of your inheritance. We have grounds for a serious countersuit." Just as we were preparing to use this new information, Laura escalated again. She showed up at the office space I rented for client meetings, creating a scene in the lobby. She loudly demanded to see me, claiming to clients that I had stolen her money and her home. When building security asked her to leave, she refused and had to be physically escorted from the premises. A client who witnessed the incident called later to terminate our contract, citing concerns about professionalism and stability. The financial and reputational damage was mounting, and Laura showed no signs of backing down. That evening, after consulting with Nicole and Dr. Vinters, I filed for a temporary protective order against my mother. The documentation was extensive: financial records, the recording from the birthday dinner, witness statements from the office incident, and a professional assessment from Dr. Vinters on the pattern of emotional abuse. The judge granted the order, prohibiting Laura from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my place of work. When Laura was served with the restraining order, she called me, despite the clear prohibition of contact. I didn't answer, but I saved the voicemail. In it, she swung between rage and tearful pleas. "You will regret this," she said at one point. "Nobody treats me like this and gets away with it. I made you, and I can just as easily destroy you." Dr. Vinters helped me see the voicemail for what it was, the final confirmation that I had made the right choice. "Those are not the words of a loving mother concerned for her daughter's well-being," she pointed out. "Those are the words of someone who sees you as a possession, not a person." As difficult as this period was, it was also clarifying. Each of Laura's escalations stripped away another layer of my self-doubt, another remnant of guilt. The mother I had spent my life trying to please, whose approval I so desperately sought, didn't exist. The real Laura was someone who would rather destroy me than see me claim my own independence. Understanding that truth was painful, but it was also the first step toward genuine freedom. Our court date was set for 3 weeks after the temporary restraining order was granted. During that time, I focused on rebuilding what Laura had tried to tear down. I personally contacted the clients who had received her calls, explaining the situation as briefly and professionally as I could. Some were understanding, others remained hesitant. I took on smaller projects to keep cash flowing and worked longer hours to prove my reliability. Nicole helped me prepare extensively for the hearing. We organized all the documentation chronologically, rehearsed my testimony, and discussed potential questions from Laura's lawyer. She brought in a colleague with expertise in financial abuse cases to strengthen our approach. The goal was not just to make the restraining order permanent, but to legally establish my right to the house and seek restitution for the embezzled funds. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse an hour early, dressed in a conservative navy suit with minimal jewelry. Nicole had advised me to project professionalism and calm, regardless of the tactics Laura and her lawyer might employ. Inside, I was a bundle of nerves, but I was determined to hold myself together. When Laura entered with Frank Wilson, I barely recognized her. The impeccably dressed, confident banking executive was gone. In her place was a frail-looking woman in a modest gray dress, with minimal makeup and her hair pulled back. She walked slowly, leaning lightly on Wilson's arm as if for support. It was a masterful performance of vulnerability, designed to starkly contrast with the narrative of an aggressive daughter they were about to present. Judge Moore, a woman in her 60s, with a shrewd gaze and a reputation for not tolerating emotional manipulation, presided over our case. She reviewed the submitted documents carefully before inviting Wilson to present Laura's side first. Wilson painted a heart-wrenching picture of a devoted mother, blindsided by her daughter's inexplicable betrayal. In his telling, Laura had sacrificed everything for me, supporting my artistic whims despite financial hardship and maintaining a home for me well into my 30s. The birthday comment was described as a misunderstood joke, taken out of context and weaponized against a loving parent. Your Honor, Wilson concluded, what we have here is a clear case of elder abuse. Ms. Spencer has forcibly removed her 58-year-old mother from her own home, cut off access to joint funds to which Laura Spencer was the primary contributor, and fabricated claims of abuse to justify this unconscionable behavior. We ask the court to immediately restore Mrs. Spencer to her home and to her financial resources. When it was Nicole's turn, she methodically dismantled this narrative. She presented the deed proving my father's intent for joint tenancy, with sole ownership clauses should either party move out. She played the unedited recording of the birthday speech, which made it clear Laura's statement was no joke. The bank records revealed a pattern of Laura systematically siphoning funds from our joint account into her secret personal account over many years. Olivia testified about the similarities between Laura's behavior and her own mother's, explaining the common patterns of narcissistic abuse. James Patterson presented his findings on the hidden account and the embezzled funds. Dr. Margaret Vinters provided expert testimony on the psychological impact of long-term emotional and financial control. She explained how Laura's behaviors aligned with recognized patterns of narcissistic parental abuse and how the public humiliation at the birthday dinner represented a typical escalation when the abuser senses the victim establishing independence. Throughout these testimonies, I watched Laura's expression shift from affected hurt to barely contained rage. Wilson whispered to her frequently, apparently trying to keep her calm, as the evidence against her version of events mounted. When I finally took the stand, I spoke directly and honestly about my experiences. I described growing up under constant criticism, never feeling good enough despite my achievements. I explained how Laura controlled our joint finances, restricted my independence, and systematically undermined my self-confidence. I shared specific incidents, dates, and witnesses. Throughout my testimony, I maintained eye contact with Judge Moore, speaking with the clarity that comes from finally acknowledging painful truths. Laura's composure finally shattered during cross-examination. Despite Wilson's attempts to control the questioning, she interrupted several times. "You were always difficult," she snapped at one point. "Always so sensitive, taking everything personally. Nothing was ever good enough for you." "Mrs. Spencer, please allow your counsel to conduct the questioning," Judge Moore warned. But Laura continued, her voice rising. "I gave you everything. A home, an education, support for your little drawing business. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in court with these lies?" "They aren't lies," I said softly. "They're the truth. I've been afraid to speak for 34 years. "You were always a failure," Laura hissed, ignoring Wilson's attempt to silence her. "Just like your father, weak, pathetic. I did the best I could with what I was given." Her outburst accomplished what hours of testimony might not have. Judge Moore's expression hardened as she witnessed firsthand the contempt Laura could barely conceal beneath her victim facade. After a brief recess, during which Wilson could be seen desperately trying to calm his client, the judge delivered her ruling. "Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a permanent restraining order prohibiting Laura Spencer from contacting Massey Spencer or coming within 500 feet of her home or place of work for a period of 1 year, at which time the order may be reviewed. Furthermore, I find that the property at 42 Maple Street legally belongs to Massey Spencer, in accordance with the provisions of Harold Spencer's will." Judge Moore continued, addressing the financial issues. "Regarding the funds withdrawn from the joint account, Laura Spencer is ordered to repay $175,000, representing Massey Spencer's share of the misappropriated inheritance within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in further legal action and potential penalties." The color drained from Laura's face as the judge spoke. When Wilson informed her they would appeal, Judge Moore added, "You certainly have the right to appeal, Mr. Wilson. However, I suggest you inform your client that any further attempts to contact Ms. Spencer directly, to slander her to clients or associates, or to otherwise violate the terms of this restraining order will be considered contempt of court and will be dealt with accordingly." As we left the courtroom, Laura caught up to us in the hallway, ignoring the restraining order issued just minutes before. Wilson tried to pull her back, but she shook his hand off. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and intense. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've done. You will regret this, Massey. When you're all alone, with no family, no support, you'll remember this day and wish you'd never started this." I looked at my mother, truly looked at her, maybe for the first time. I saw the rage, the need for control, the complete inability to see me as a separate person deserving of respect and autonomy, and I felt something unexpected: pity. "I already know what it's like to live without family support," I told her. "I've lived that way my entire life, even under your roof. The only difference now is that I'll be alone by choice, not because I was told I was unworthy of love." I turned to leave, but added one last thought. "You asked for a birthday present, Mother. You said the best gift would be for me to get out of your life. Consider this me, finally giving you exactly what you asked for." As Nicole led me away, I could hear Wilson pleading with Laura to calm down, warning her about violating the order on the courthouse steps. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I was walking towards something, not just away from someone. The distinction made all the difference. 18 months have passed since that day in court. The house on Maple Street still stands, but it has transformed along with me. I've painted the walls in colors my father would have loved and my mother would have hated. A warm terracotta in the living room, a peaceful sage in the kitchen, and a vibrant teal in what used to be Laura's room, but is now my home office. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, painting over the memories of criticism and control with colors that brought me joy. My graphic design business survived the turmoil and has even begun to thrive. After the initial loss of clients from Laura's interference, it was the word of mouth from those who remained loyal that helped me rebuild. I expanded my services to include brand strategy consulting, which attracted larger clients and more stable contracts. 6 months ago, I hired my first employee, a talented recent graduate who reminds me of myself at that age, only she has the mentor I never did. My therapy sessions with Dr. Vinters continued weekly for the first year, then gradually tapered off as I developed stronger coping mechanisms and clearer boundaries. We worked through the complex grief of mourning a parent who is still alive. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Vinters would remind me whenever I grew frustrated with a setback. Some days will be harder than others. The goal isn't to never feel pain from this loss, but to understand that the pain doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Through therapy, I came to understand how my childhood had shaped my adult patterns. I recognized my tendency to seek approval from authority figures, to apologize excessively, and to doubt my own perceptions when challenged. Naming these patterns was the first step toward changing them. Slowly, I learned to trust my own judgment, to state my needs clearly, and to set healthy boundaries in all my relationships. 8 months after the hearing, I met Daniel at a charity benefit for arts education. He's an architect, like my father, but with a quiet confidence and a genuine interest in others that immediately set him apart. Our relationship unfolded slowly, built on deliberate conversations about expectations, communication styles, and past experiences. When I finally told him the full story of what happened with Laura, he listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions about how the experience had shaped me. My father was controlling too, he told me. Not in the same way as your mother, but enough that I understand the hypervigilance, always watching for signs of disapproval. We're both works in progress, but I think we can progress together, if you're willing. We have been together for 10 months now. Daniel respects my independence while offering support when I need it. He understands when certain interactions trigger old insecurities, and he helps me distinguish between present reality and past conditioning. For the first time, I am experiencing what a healthy partnership feels like, one built on mutual respect, not power dynamics. Beyond my romantic life, I have built what therapists call a chosen family. Olivia and I remain close, our weekly coffee dates a fixture in my schedule. Nicole is no longer just my lawyer, but a trusted friend who joins us for monthly dinners. My neighbor Elijah, a retired English professor, has become a father figure, sharing book recommendations and gardening advice. Together with Daniel and a few other close friends, they form the support community I always needed but never had growing up. As for Laura, I have maintained the no-contact boundary. She appealed the court's decision, just as she'd threatened. But the appeal was denied based on the substantial evidence from the original hearing. According to Susan, who sends occasional brief updates, Laura moved to Florida 6 months ago to live near her sister. She still maintains that she was the victim in our story, never acknowledging her role in the breakdown of our relationship. Laura occasionally sends emails, despite the restraining order. Some are furious, blaming me for her move and the damage to her reputation. Others are manipulative, attempting to guilt me with details of her health problems or financial struggles. In the beginning, these messages would leave me in an emotional tailspin for days. Now I simply forward them to my lawyer without reading past the subject line, and I move on with my day, unaffected. The most profound lesson I've learned on this painful journey is about the nature of love itself. True love, parental or otherwise, is not about control or about shaping someone to meet your expectations. It is about seeing another person for who they truly are and supporting their autonomy and growth. My mother never loved me that way. She loved the idea of a daughter she could mold into a reflection of herself, but she never saw or accepted the real me. I also learned that I had to love myself enough to walk away from relationships that diminish rather than enrich my life. For years, I stayed because I believed that family obligation outweighed personal well-being. I now understand that no relationship, not even one with a parent, is worth the cost of continuous emotional abuse. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to release the hope that a toxic person will change and instead focus on building a life filled with genuine connection. The journey of rebuilding after family estrangement is not an easy one. There are holidays that feel emptier, life milestones without the witnesses you expected to have, and the occasional well-meaning questions about family that reopen healing wounds. But there is also freedom. The freedom to become the person you were meant to be, free from constant criticism. the freedom to create new traditions and relationships built on mutual respect. And for me, the freedom to define family by love and action, not just by blood. If you are listening to this and struggling with a toxic family relationship, please know that you are not alone. The decision to set boundaries, whether it's temporary distance or permanent estrangement, is deeply personal and often misunderstood by others. Only you know the full story of your relationship, and only you can decide what level of contact is healthy for you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice for your own well-being that others didn't understand? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes, just knowing that others have walked a similar path can be the validation we need to trust our own journey. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to help others find their way to healthier relationships and self-acceptance. Thank you for witnessing my story, and may you find the courage to write your own ending, whatever that may be for you.